Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the year's end. The Gregorian year 2022 has come to its inevitable close. And as we look forward to a productive, creative, prosperous, and most of all, a healthy 2023, it is traditional to offer New Year's greetings. The new year is an occasion, a time of reflection on events, on promises made and promises broken. It's a time to remember. One of my dearest memories is how year after year, every Gregorian New Year, my mother would bestow a blessing on our family using a variation on the wording she used during the weeks leading up to the Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah. It is a tradition I now miss tremendously. Despite the celebrations, religious implications of New Year's or Sylvester, a new year only naturally forces most people to take account of the past year and look toward an even better future. And so too this year. There are some very big events that took place over the course of 2022. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, COVID moving into a more manageable status, pivotal elections around the world. But rather than the large looming events, experiences taught me to focus on some of the small events, the smaller ones that happened during the year, and then to monitor those events. These events, these small events, may very well be the tiny pebbles in still water which cause a ripple that expands and changes the world. So looking at the small events might be worthwhile. The most significant of these events happened September 16, 2022. On that day in a hospital in Tehran, a 22-year-old Iranian woman named Mahsa Amini died. She'd been brought from an Iranian prison cell to the hospital after suffering, we are told, a stroke. Amini had been arrested, interrogated, and tortured by the morality police, also referred to as Iran's modesty police. Her crime was violating the law requiring that all women and girls cover their hair in public. To the credit of the Israeli press, and especially the Jerusalem Post, this story was covered from the beginning, from the very, very beginning. Only recently, now 4 months later, are we starting to see some coverage in the international media. When news of Mahsa Amini's death reached her hometown of Saqqez, in the Kurdish area of northwestern Iran, several dozen people gathered to protest her death at the hands of the religious police. This is key. Iranians poured out to condemn the death and protest the, quote, mistreatment of women in Iran. That was their reason. They were, in essence, unabashedly standing up to the Iranian Islamic rule. What started in Saqqez with only a few dozen people in mid-September has grown into protest after protest after protest in hundreds of Iranian cities and towns. The protests have spread throughout the entire country. Every day they gain more and more strength. Young people, cultural leaders, actors, athletes are all joining. They're joining this enormous movement. When the Iranian World Cup team refused to sing their national anthem before a game, they were participating in an Amini-inspired protest against the regime. When the famous Iranian actress was arrested after posting her support for the protest movement on social media, she was participating in an Amini-inspired protest. And the protests go on. Iran leadership is in business of intimidation. They engage in public executions and rush trials. Iranian leadership thrives on frightening the masses into conformity. Accurate numbers of deaths and arrests are traditionally hard to verify when it comes to Iran. The leadership controls the media. But today, Iranian leadership wants Iranians to know that at least 450 protesters have been killed in protests. And yet the protests go on. The Iranian regime has, until now, been remarkably subdued in their response. Sounds strange with all the arrests and the killings, the deaths, but I'm speaking relatively, and I'm speaking about Iran. We know that the regime can be brutal when putting down uprisings, arresting and killing by the thousands, including family members. For Iran, 450 killings is a drop in the bucket. I'm remembering a television advertisement which aired during Iran's Green Revolution, which lasted from the spring of 2009 to the spring of 2010. Green in Iran did not symbolize the environment. Green was a symbol of awakening, springtime. The period was also referred to as the Persian Awakening. Its objective was to oust then President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. In the ad, the Iranian regime depicted hundreds of empty graves, pre-dug holes in the ground, and the caption read, "Preparing your grave." There was no subtlety here. The regime was announcing, "Those who challenge us will die, and your graves have already been dug." Fast forward to 2022, almost 2023. If these protests continue to grow, and as of now they show no signs of dissipating, Masa Amini-inspired protests of 2022 may be signaling early stages of an Iranian revolution. Realistically speaking, until now, there's been no sign of leadership splintering or even flinching as a result of the massive protests. Time and careful monitoring will tell. Here's to 2023. Whatever it brings, may it be for the good. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from Ynet, and it's entitled, "American Jewry's Support of Israel is Conditional, and It's a Problem." Subtitled, Opinion, U.S. Jews warning to withdraw support for the Jewish state over results of recent Israeli elections is nothing short of treachery at a time when anti-Semitism is being legitimized by celebs, sports figures, and even lawmakers. The column is authored by Mark Levy, and it was published on December 25th, 2022. This is a very important column. It focuses on the fast-growing division between Israel and many Jews in America. The divisive element is all about politics. It's not about the love of Israel. And that's why it's such an important column and where the problems emerge. Now to the column. Of all the absurdities in the relationship between Israel and American Jews, the latest is one of the biggest. I won't support Israel if it isn't democratic. It's a reflection of the results of Israel's election last month, putting Benjamin Netanyahu in the position of forming a government with extremist views, who can objectionably be called criminals, racists, and even terrorists. Levy now explains that indeed several members of the new government of Israel are racist. He emphasized, for example, the new national security minister has been arrested 53 times, and he was convicted 7 times, and he's not the only one. Levy continues. For example, Otzma Yehudit, or Jewish Power, party chief Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is national security minister in the new government, will oversee the police, bragged in a 2015 interview that he had been indicted by Israeli prosecutors 53 times and convicted 7 times, reportedly on charges of obstructing police officers in performance of his duty, rioting, incitement to racism, and multiple charges of supporting terrorist organization and possession of propaganda material for a terrorist organization. Even so, the idea of conditional support for Israel raises questions about the whole relationship between the two sides. The anomaly of conditional support concept is illustrated best by one of its proponents, Abe Foxman, longtime head of the Anti-Defamation League, for decades the foremost fighter in the battle against anti-Semitism in the US and abroad. Levy describes how certain leaders like Abe Foxman are making their support of Israel conditional because they are not pleased with the results of the election. That's a political issue, not one of the love of Israel. This is how Levy responds to that reaction. Abe and others don't like the results of the Israeli election. Well, neither do lots of Israelis. But the fact is, that's how the election turned out. It's democratic by definition. Here's how I replied to one American Jewish critic on anti-social media. Making your support of Israel conditional on the outcome of election is not support at all. It's hypocrisy. Over here, in actual Israel, Those of us who are horrified by the outcome of this election are doubling down to fix it next time. We still believe in our country. I don't think it's too much to ask you to do the same. Lavie spends a good amount of time explaining that the real battle is anti-Semitism and against anti-Semitism and against hatred of Israel and against hatred of Jews, and that these statements, like the one made by Abe Foxman, which outline conditional support for Israel, they actually assist the haters of Israel rather than help Israel at all. This is how the column concludes. Standing in the way of that are public statements from American Jews criticizing Israel, even if meant well, like Abe Foxman's, they are convenient ammunition for the haters to fire back, and they do. So let's reconfigure the relationship. Less philanthropy, less moralizing, more partnership, more cooperation, more joint planning to fight the real enemy. Just to be clear, the real enemy is not this or that Israeli politician or government. We Israelis will deal with that. The real enemy is anti-Semitism. Let's fight it together. This is a very, very excellent column. It's an excellent column in so many different ways, not just because it's cogent, but it identifies an issue and addresses it very clearly, an issue that's going to grow. Next up is a column from Ynet. It's entitled, PA's Abbas Appears to Abandon Policy of Armed Resistance. Subtitled, Analysis. Expert says that Abbas's change of formal tone carries far less impact than first seems, due to his declining political authority in the PA, which he is struggling to maintain. That's a very long subtitle, but it's true. This column originally appeared in the Media Line on December 16, 2022. The Media Line and Ynet have an agreement. Many excellent pieces from the Media Line appear in Ynet, like this column, which was written by Mohammed Al-Qassim. I was with Media Line for a very long time. Al-Qassim begins. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, an advocate of popular resistance, told Al Arabiya journalist Maisan Azam in an interview that, quote, I do not embrace armed resistance now, and I may change my mind, unquote. He continues, Nihad Abu Ghosh, a Palestinian analyst from Ramallah, said that even though the remarks sound as if Abbas is abandoning his long-standing policy of popular resistance, in reality, there won't be any change. The point of this very insightful column is that Abbas does not have the power, and indeed never had the power, to control or support and guide the armed resistance. He continues, this verbal shift does not carry much weight because his political position is weak, and the PA is weak, he said. President Abbas, not once in his life did he adopt armed resistance, nor did he support it. But armed resistance on the ground imposes itself on everyone, and it's a natural reaction to the occupations, incursions in Nablus and Jenin, added Abu Ghosh, referring to the Israeli security forces' operations in the West Bank and Palestinian cities. Now the author correctly asserts that Abbas is more and more irrelevant within the Palestinian Authority and within the Arabic world in general, that he's lost any sense of reality. To put it another way, Abbas has become less and less relevant. This is how the column concludes. Abbas reasserted his position on normalization, affirming his stance on Arab states establishing diplomatic ties with Israel before the Palestinians have reached a final solution with Israel. I'm against normalization in principle because I'm against violating the decision of the Arab Summit. But what can I do more than that? I do not normalize. I exist under occupation, he said. Abbas is in Saudi Arabia for an Arab summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping that will include Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Tunisian President Kais Saied, Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, Moroccan Prime Minister Aziz Akamouch, and Lebanese caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati. Thank you, Mohammed Al-Qassim, for providing us with this enormously important insight into Abbas and what he really thinks about armed resistance and resistance in general, and his role and his leadership in the Palestinian Authority. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 7 cartoons and memes today. The first meme makes fun of spelling mistakes. We see them all the time, and we laugh. But this meme makes fun of the mistakes made by self-professed experts, mistakes that are hard to correct. The caption reads that a tattoo artist proclaims, "When living life with few regrets, a mobile tattoo removal and welding, live with no regrets." Did he write regrets intentionally? You decide. Next up is a hilarious license plate from the state of Utah. The car is unmistakably a new Tesla, 100% electric. The plate reads, "Coal Power." It's funny and is one meme in a huge series of memes that addresses buyer's remorse by Tesla owners. The next 5 cartoons are all by Yaakov Kirshen, part of his Dry Bones. This will be Kirshen's 50th year drawing dry bones. You should check out his website. He has wonderful memorabilia, pictures, and all kinds of course, dry bones cartoons. As I've explained before, Kirshen is an unabashed lover of Israel. He lives in Jerusalem. He was published in the Jerusalem Post for decades. This first cartoon expresses an important attitude towards anti-Semitism. A man sits at his computer and says, "The current wave of anti-Semitism is nothing new, other than our decision to stop it." To Kirshen, it appears that Jewish leadership, especially in Israel, is taking this current wave of anti-Semitism very seriously. This next cartoon is perfect. Kirshen has several variations on this theme in his website. We see a trio of croaking frogs, and the caption reads, "Israel's new government has set off a chorus of criticism, and it hasn't even done anything yet." No doubt there's cause for concern, there's no doubt about that. But Kirshen is saying, at least wait for something objectionable to arise before criticizing. This next Dry Bones is about the New York Times, and it's a very funny and uses a profound turn of a phrase. In the drawing, the New York Times is depicted as a sinking ship. A man is talking to his dog. The dog's name is Doobie. It is a recurring figure in Dry Bones. The man says to his dog, "The New York Times says the Israel they knew is gone. So is the New York Times we once knew. Wave goodbye, Doobie." In this last cartoon, Dry Bones finds the sad humor in the reality of the Middle East. The cartoon depicts Israel sitting, just sitting, and the caption reads, "The United Arab Emirates, our Abraham Accord ally, was a co-sponsor of the UN's anti-Israel catastrophe resolution. And then," it reads, "at the UN, our new friends prefer to play with our old enemies." Kirshen is saying that regardless of these new accords, things have not changed all that much. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Iran's Revolutionary Guards arrested 7 people, including dual nationals linked to Iran and the United Kingdom. The reasons for the arrest, according to a statement published by Iranian state media, is anti-government protests. The statement reads, 7 main leaders of the recent protests related to the United Kingdom were detained by the intelligence services of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, including dual nationals who were trying to leave the country. Iranian police are operating under the assumption that these 7 people are outside organizers sent to Iran as plants with the intention of disrupting life in Iran and fomenting anti-government actions. Publicizing their arrest is a tool to convince the Iranian masses that the protests rocking the country are not the result of local Iranian dissatisfaction, but they are imported by non-Iranian influences like the United Kingdom. Along the same lines, IRNA, Iran's state news agency, also announced the arrest. They announced at least, the arrest of 4 operational Israeli Mossad spy teams. Not spies, but spy teams. According to IRNA's defense correspondent, Tehran's intelligence ministry reports that Iranian soldiers identified Mossad members and arrested them, claiming they were taking advantage of the riots in Iran. Of course, the riots they are referring to are the riots spurred by the September 16th death. while in police custody of Mahsa Amini. She's the Iranian Kurdish woman we spoke of earlier, who was arrested and allegedly violating the country's strict dress code for women. This announcement by Irna is very similar to the announcement about the UK spies. Everyone in Iran knows about Israel's clandestine operation group called the Mossad. Everyone knows about it. The arrest of 4 complete teams of Mossad operatives in Iran is a huge victory for Iran. It is even bigger victory for Iranian leadership, so that they can convince the masses that it was the Mossad that has been involved in the mass protests against the regime. Of course, it's most probably totally false. It's fiction. The IDF announced that Israeli Air Force decided to ground its fleet, its own fleet, of 11 F-35B fighter jets following the crash of an American F-35 Model B 2 weeks ago in Waco, Texas. The Army statement, the IDF statement reads, "The Air Force will analyze the findings of the investigation of the incident and recommend how to safely return the planes to flight." The F-35 is the newest addition to Israel's Air Force. These 11 fighter jets are stealth crafts. Stealth crafts cannot be detected by radar. They are one of Israel's secret weapons. The particular F-35 that we're talking about crashed in Waco as it was landing. The F-35 lands vertically. It just drops down slowly, and there's no need for a runway. The plane bounced, and then bounced forward, and fell on its nose. It spun out of control, and the pilot ejected. Israel needs to know that there's no systemic problem with the landing before it resumes the use of their F-35 secret fighter jets. Russia announced that it is now ready to negotiate with all parties involved in the conflict in Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin said, "I believe that we are acting in the right direction. We are defending our national interests, the interests of our citizens, our people, and we have no other choice but to protect our citizens." In an interview, Putin also told Russian state television that, "We are ready to negotiate with everyone involved about acceptable solutions, but that is up to them. We are not the ones refusing to negotiate. They are." This is an important step because only negotiations will bring about an end to the conflict. The start of these kinds of talks are the hardest because parties appear so far apart, but in time, the issues start to get resolved. Mossad chief David Barnea discussed several important issues while addressing an event that honored Mossad operatives. Barnea indicated that Iran will continue to arm Russia in its war against Ukraine. He explained that Iran's supplying of drones to Russia is part of a much larger relationship between Iran and Russia. The Russia-Iran alliance is strong and it is essential for both parties. Without the alliance, each of these countries would become more and more isolated in the international scheme. Barnea also explained that even though Iran will continue its uranium enrichment program, some European nations are inexplicably still attempting to return to the 2015 nuclear deal. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Rabbi Chaim Drukman, a giant of a rabbinic leader, died this week at the age of 90. His death, a blow to the Jewish world, came as a result of complications from COVID. Chaim Drukman was born in 1932 in the town of Kuti, then Poland, now Ukraine. Drukman survived the Holocaust first by hiding along with his parents, and then in 1944, fleeing Europe. Young Chaim posed as the son of a couple that had no children of their own, but had travel papers allowing them to immigrate to then Palestine. Shortly after the war, his parents joined them in Palestine. In Palestine, Drukman studied in Bnei Akiva affiliated yeshiva in the community of Kfar Ro'eh. In 1949, he enlisted in Israel's Defense Forces, the IDF, in the Nachal program. During that time, he helped establish religious kibbutzim, Kiryat Tzvi in the north of Israel, and Kibbutz Saad near the Gaza border. After his time in the IDF, Druckmann studied at Merkaz HaRav Yeshiva, the flagship institution of religious Zionist movement. It's located in Jerusalem. At the time, it was under the leadership of the legendary Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, son of Rabbi Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, Israel's first Ashkenazi chief rabbi, and the progenitor of the religious Zionist theology and the entire movement itself. Druckmann was a brilliant and devoted student, and emerged as Rav Kook's top disciple. After a brief stint in the United States in the mid-50s as a Bnei Akiva Shaliach, or emissary, Druckmann was sent by Rav Kook to run the Or Etzion Yeshiva in Merkaz Shapira, which was then a tiny community northeast of Ashkelon. As Rosh Yeshiva of Or Etzion, Druckmann taught some of Israel's most influential leaders, including Defense Minister Benny Gantz, former Mossad Chief Yossi Cohen, Likud Knesset member Yisrael Katz, former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, was one of his very close disciples up until the very end. And he continued to consult with Rav Druckmann even after they parted ways during Bennett's tenure as Prime Minister. Gantz eulogized his former teacher, his Rebbe, recalling his time at Or Etzion this way: "My heart weeps over the death of Rabbi Druckmann. I had the honor of being one of his students at Or Etzion Yeshiva as a youth. The rabbi was a believer, dedicated to the state of Israel and the Zionist idea, and I always found that he had an open ear. A firm believer in the sanctity of the biblical land of Israel, Druckmann was part of a group that held a Passover Seder in the city of Hebron in 1968, leading to the eventual establishment of a renewed Jewish settlement in the city. Following the devastating 1973 Yom Kippur War, Druckmann and a group of other Kook students formed Gush Emunim, a group dedicated to Jewish settlement, particularly those dealing with the biblical land of Israel." Chaim Druckmann was more than a great rabbi. He was also a politician, having spent time as a member of Knesset. He held the position of deputy minister. He was the head of all of Yeshivot Bnei Akiva. He was the head of all of the Hesder programs that combine army service and learning. He was the head of Israel's conversion school and the court converting thousands of people every year to Judaism. He created a special rabbinical school for Ethiopian immigrants. His granddaughter married one of those Ethiopian rabbinical students. He was a power broker. More than anything else, he tried to unite people. He was married to Sarah, the first female religious graduate of Hadassah Medical School in Jerusalem. He's survived by her and his 11 children, hundreds of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren, are hundreds and actually thousands of students. Reb Chaim Druckmann taught and influenced Jewish leaders for 70 years. His impact was so great. We knew each other well. While I disagreed with him over certain principles, I never doubted his conviction or his sincerity. He was a kindly man. He was a wise man. He was a brilliant Torah scholar. There will never again on our horizon be a leader like Rav Chaim Druckmann. Tihei Zichro Baruch. May his memory be a blessing for us all. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.